Hello YouTube, welcome back to Nutkin Farm. Well, autumn 2025 and the seasons are starting to do more or less what they're meant to do post the irregular cyclone weather we've been having, and always a pleasure to get up in the morning and watch the mists sort of peel back from the water and from the surrounding lands. Absolutely lovely to see it sort of peel away and the blue sky get revealed a bit later on. I had the privilege of going to the marquee season launch as a guest, not as a marquee grower, yesterday at Summerland Farm, and got a chance to meet a bunch of other farmers. Yeah, absolutely great people, and all very keen on the launch. Apparently it's a much friendlier launch this year than it was in previous years, when the price they announced to growers was much less palatable. And as I've mentioned in recent videos, the price this year for them is $4.22. Marquee's price at the moment seems to be the top price available. I'm told, without verification, that MWT came out at $4.20, Suncoast Gold came out at $4, and I think Starman came out at $4.15, but I'm still compiling that information, and that comparison video on pricing is coming once we get some more offers on the table. But it does seem, in retrospect, that Marquee has gone all out to give growers a decent price this year, and a lot of the growers at the meeting appreciated it. The other feedback I got from growers, interestingly, was on the damage from Tropical Cyclone Alfred. And it's clear that it was very unpredictable. Some of the Rosebank farmers, I ran into Matt Molino and a couple of others. They've done fairly well, and really I've been around my orchard a fair bit now, and the damage is minimal compared to some of the other stories I'm hearing. Lots of Tregeagle got fairly hard hit. There was a farm in Broken Head, I think owned by Tony Flick, that lost, he claimed, about 1,000 trees. That's a very big loss. And I've also heard from one of the grower liaisons of Macadamias Direct that farms in Tweed Heads or closer to Tweed Heads got absolutely hammered, and that's really quite sad. Reports to the New South Wales DPI of damage are, however, slower than they need to be. As of 21 March, they'd only received about 119 reports of damage, and there's many more macadamia farmers than that. Time to speak up, because the government needs to know the extent of damage before they start making decisions about disaster relief grants. But the other thing that arose from the meeting is something that sort of stirred up some feelings I've had lately of concern about what macadamia growers are being told of the marketing agenda, and in fact the broader issue of how we're marketing macadamias in the world market lately. And a lot of focus naturally has gone into this idea that India will save all of us, and that the growing macadamia production around the world is all going to be swallowed up by India, because we're going to get India addicted to macadamias, and they're going to buy up macadamias and get rid of the increasing supply problem by increasing demand massively from over 1 billion people. Now, I have some worries about that. Firstly, I suppose, I should say, I hate generalising about any ethnic or cultural group. However, I do have quite a bit of experience in Western Sydney working with the Indian community, and I've grown to respect them and like them over time. They are, I must say, a formidable culture, a proud people, and they like to do things for themselves. They're not the kind of attitude that could become sort of a long-term customer for large amounts of imports that they simply hand money over for. Not their style. And it's sort of being confirmed in the feedback I'm getting from this channel. I looked up the YouTube statistics, which as a YouTube creator, you can see who's looking at your video, not down to the person, but they'll give you summaries. And one of the interesting stats on my channel is that 1 in 5 viewers in the last few months has been from India. Now, this isn't a channel about buying macadamias or eating macadamias or cooking with macadamias. It doesn't do any of those things. It's about cultivation. And every single inquiry I've received from India, not every second one, every single one, has been about where can I get trees? I'm really keen to start growing macadamias. How do I do it? And there's only limited support I can provide. And, you know, there's a couple of people have sent some very detailed questions that I literally don't have the time to answer. And so if I haven't sent detailed answers to some of you who've got in touch, please don't be offended. It's not so much a priority thing. It's just I can't do everything at once. And you know, I mean, this is something that was raised at the Mac group, you know, when we sort of queried the marketing managers saying, look, you know, are we just going to create another industry sort of like China where you sell them macadamias and they'll buy them initially, but then they'll want to grow them for themselves? The response was, well, we do analysis on all these countries and not much of India is good for growing macadamias. But guess what, sunshine? Not much of Australia is good for growing macadamias either. And, you know, we're the second largest producer in the world. So what do we do with this? I mean, I do think in a way we're on the wrong track, hoping that India is going to solve all our problems. It's not one-dimensional, and I'm not suggesting that the AMS and Marquee and everybody else is only pinning their hopes on India as some sort of one-button solution. But I am worried that some farmers are getting the idea that India is our saviour without sort of looking at other options. And it brings us to the sort of more the subject of how we market macadamias anyway. I mean, sort of in the legal profession, the old rule used to be that the best source of new market share was from your existing clients, because they're the easiest to market to. They know you, they like you, they trust you, and it's easier to sell them more than to try and find new customers. That's obviously a very limiting attitude to marketing. They've taken the view that because the macadamia supply is growing, we really need to open up new markets. So assuming we need to do that and not just sell more macadamias to the people who already love them, what new markets should we really be focused at? Should it be the Indias of this world? You know, large population, large affluent population in certain parts of the country. Or should we be looking a little bit further, like looking one move further than simply end consumers of macadamias, and look at more influences and ways we can try and encourage on a sort of cooking and cultural level the use of macadamias in food? I've often mentioned Europe as one of the essentially forgotten targets of the macadamia marketing industry. It's not that there isn't some marketing there, but we have a very uneven coverage in Europe. So Germany, and to an extent Austria, love macadamias. They're sold. They love them. But if you had to ask the question, which countries in the world have the most influence on cooking and eating? Surely two of your top answers would be France and Italy, because their influence in cuisine, the way they pass ideas to the world, the creations they come up with, are noticed and respected, probably disproportionately to other countries who aren't famous for their cuisine. Why is it then that in much of France and Italy, they don't even know about macadamias? Here on Nutkin Farm, I had some Italian guests a year and a bit ago who had never heard of the macadamia, never seen a macadamia nut, let alone tasted one. They came here, they picked up nuts off the ground, they thought it was wonderful, they started eating them, and by the time they went home to Italy, they'd cleaned out macadamias from everywhere they could find them and stuffed their bags full of, beautiful macadamia kernel products. They did honey roasted, they did dry roasted, they did salted, they did raw. They took all these back to Italy as a novelty. My question is why? Why is it a novelty? Why aren't macadamias more mainstream in the kind of countries who will produce recipes that actually bring macadamias to a world stage? Think about it a little bit more. Macadamias are an elite eating product. Okay, you're not going to find them in a Snickers bar anytime soon, right? That's for cheap peanuts and that sort of thing. And like a lot of the affluent society, they're time poor but money rich. They don't really want to fight to get at their food, so selling them nut in shell isn't really a great idea. You've got to sell them products that they can eat as snacks, or when they eat out at night, go out to dinner somewhere, recipes that contain macadamias can be an attraction to them because it's a premium nut. It's so good in so many savoury dishes, and not to mention, of course, fantastic in desserts. So focusing purely on the end consumer and saying, look, this country has a whole lot of people who can directly buy macadamia nuts, just seems a little bit one-dimensional to me, and that perhaps what we should be looking at is marketing to countries that A, can't grow macadamias for themselves because it's a safer market if they start buying them, and B, have that influence beyond their own borders. Right? I mean, the French are amazingly creative cooks. They also make some of the best chocolate in the world. It's not just the Swiss, although we should really be pushing harder on the Swiss companies as well. I know that Lindt has had some attention lately, but, some other chocolate makers probably need to be targeted a bit more heavily for using macadamias as an ingredient. I mean, we all like Lindor balls. Surely a Lindor ball could perfectly fit a macadamia nut, or one of the smaller ones anyway, and would be an instant hit. So I don't know. I mean, marketing is a tricky subject. You can get lucky sometimes. We got lucky with Korea because we cottoned onto a particular influencer who managed to get a lot of followers in Korea to buy Australian macadamias, and specifically Australian macadamias. Now, that marketing effort cost next to nothing. It just required the persuading of one sort of particular influencer. In India, well, the update we got from the marquee meeting is that a lot of the bureaucratic red tape has been overcome, and that there's multiple layers of bureaucracy that you have to get through in order to sell anything in India. And we have a decent free trade agreement, which means that Australian macadamias can get into India, once they do get in, more favourably than other countries' products do, because other countries' products are still tariffed much more heavily than Australia's products are. And that's all fine, assuming, of course, that the Indians want to buy all that many macadamias, or that they'll remain a customer for macadamias as opposed to a producer that will become self-sufficient, as India does in just about every other aspect of agriculture and trade. What other countries could we look at? Where are we not focusing? Well, I've just, I still am partly, I suppose, from my background, a bit of a believer in selling more heavily into the markets where we're already accepted. I'd like to know what we're doing in Japan to keep the demand up there. I'd like to see what we're doing in the Middle East, where, there's ample wealth and luxury products are something that are very much put on display and very much treasured in, the hotels of Saudi Arabia and, those other wealthy areas that couldn't grow a macadamia if they tried. These are the sorts of cultures where, if you're selling a high-end product, perhaps we should be putting our focus a little more on there. And then if they're used in the snack industry, using that as a starting point so that people get the taste of macadamias by themselves, but then start seeing those macadamias in the recipes, in the restaurants they go to, in the sweet products that they buy, and also in savoury terms, elsewhere. What about America? Well, we don't quite know. I've done an episode not that long ago about macadamia trade wars, and they're not turning out exactly as I predicted, and that itself was something I predicted. I thought it would be quite a rocky road, and it's certainly been fairly rocky. One thing we do know is I think US agricultural products have been tariffed in China, so I suppose any sales of macadamias made from Hawaii to China are going to be caught by that. But that's barely a ripple in the world market, and we can't really expect to get too much out of that. If Australia gets tariffed generally, then the marquee representative did reassure us that exports to the US from Australia in macadamias are very small. That's comforting on one level, but the underlying question is, why are our exports to America so small? Why were they so small in the first place? Who else is getting those sales? And why is that? Perhaps Australian macadamia marketing, could focus a little more on the more affluent markets in the US. What about general conditions worldwide? Well, there's a lot of economic flux, and no one's feeling especially rich in any country at the moment, or at least not from the headlines I see and the current affairs articles I look at. And macadamias, as you know, as a premium product, something that sell more in the good times when people can pay their mortgages and have a little bit of money left over. And it's a marketing effort that I do worry about, because the longer this poor period goes, the more likely we are to lose a whole generation of younger macadamia buyers who grow up compromising on cost, looking for low-cost food because the economic circumstances are tough, and really missing out on getting introduced to the macadamia, even in markets where the macadamia is well known in the middle classes and the older age groups. And so if I, had 5 minutes with the marketing manager at the AMS, I'd certainly be saying, look, target the younger generation in the markets that we already have. Target the cuisine makers, target the people who influence what we eat, rather than just the end consumers who eat them. Because these are the ways, I think, into getting into people's diets, even if they don't make a conscious choice to purchase macadamias. The fact that they become widespread and well known is enough to then drive some acceptance and sales, not just in new markets, but in our existing ones. Something worth a bit of discussion about, and if anyone has anything to contribute, as always, put a comment down below. I respond to everybody pretty much, and it would be valuable to know your views. And if you're in India watching, why don't you make a contribution? Do you want to grow macadamias? Do you think India is a country that will buy macadamias long term? Or do you agree with me that, with the Indian psyche and the Indian self-reliance and inventiveness, we're going to see an Indian macadamia industry sooner rather than later? And these sorts of things can guide us and the rest of the world and stop us from being, I think, led into some tunnel vision about what's good for us and what's going to be the answer to macadamia marketing to cover the increasing supply we are supposed to be facing all the way through the next 10 years. Thanks for watching again, guys. I'm going to go do some work now that the sun's finally breaking through the fog, and I will catch you again soon. Bye for now.